Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Sain, interim pastor of Holy Communion Lutheran Church, Banner Elk, and I'd like to welcome you to our lectionary Bible study for the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany. We're in Year B, and we'll be looking at Mark's Gospel. Today's lectionary Gospel reading is from the first chapter of Mark, verses 21 through 28, and I'd like to share that text with you right now. Jesus and his disciples went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. Before we examine this text, I'd like for us to go back, walk back a few weeks. I think in a previous video, shared a little bit of background about the Gospel of Mark. And so I'd like to go back to the very first verse, which we're again in the text today. We're still in the first chapter. But in the first verse, the author describes that this story that he is about to tell, and by the way, let's remember that the gospel, the good news, was put together in an oral tradition. It was meant to be listened to as opposed to being read out of a book or even out of a scroll. There in the first verse, the person who's listening to this story is informed and is given the privilege of being allowed to know this information along with the author, a little about Jesus' identity as the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God. And then we begin to discover that some characters in the story who do not comprehend Jesus' identity. And those folks are primarily religious leaders, whether they're scribes or Pharisees. At the same time, Jesus' own disciples don't always understand that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. They recognize something about Jesus. They're not able to plumb their desires for who they want Jesus to be with the person that he actually turns out to be. Now, at the same time, there's a surprisingly large number of cast members, so to speak, of this story who do recognize Jesus. And of course, we see in the text today that the unclean spirits recognize who Jesus is. Likewise, the blind, the lame, widows, orphans, children, lepers, and women, more often than not, do recognize who Jesus is. And that leads us to another thought about the Gospel of Mark. It's this understanding of what some scholars refer to as the messianic secret. In other words, this desire that Jesus has not to reveal his identity. It's almost as if he's not wanting to attract people by the powers that he can do. So in the text today, he admonished the demons who identified him as the Holy One of God. He told them to keep quiet. A few verses later, down in verse 34, we'll see Jesus again driving out demons from people, but he does not allow the demons to speak. And then a few chapters later, the same thing happens when unclean spirits see Jesus and they fall down and cry out, "You are the Son of God," and he gave them strict orders not to tell others. Jesus also instructs the people that he heals or who are responsive to him. He instructs them not to tell anyone. Now, I believe that our text today serves a primary purpose as the Gospel of Mark is beginning to unfold. In it, we see the introduction of conflict. Jesus, the text says, teaches as one having authority and not as the scribes. So you see the author, as he's telling the story, there is certainly a difference between what Jesus does and what the scribes do, and it would appear that what Jesus does has more authenticity about it than that of the scribes. This conflict, we'll begin to see it more and more. The mention of it today is done indirectly. The scribes are not there. Or at least we're not told that they're there. But soon, as the story unfolds, we'll see the tension and the conflict actually come to a head between the scribes and the religious authorities and Jesus, leading up eventually to when he will be arrested, tried, and crucified. But it seems as though a key element of our story tonight has to do with this whole concept of what it means to have authority, and that Jesus has authority and the scribes do not. And then a second notion has to do with how people respond to what Jesus does. Questions, I've got some discussion questions that are in the section of the video that gives the description of what the video is about. You can click on it and access the discussion questions. If you would like to be a part of our Tuesday night Bible study, please send me an email and I will send you an access link so that you can join us on Zoom. I hope you have a great evening and enjoy participating in the Bible study, and that you'll think about joining us.